Hi there. If we haven't been introduced before, I'm Emma O'Brien. I am an award-winning dog photographer, and I'm also a Martha Beck certified self-leadership and life coach. I'm sharing something quite personal in this vlog, which is navigating the loss of an elderly pet. Unfortunately, on the 6th of August, I had to say goodbye to Hazel, who was one of my dogs. She was 13 and a half, and it was all a little bit sudden. I had a collection of dogs that I amassed from when I arrived in South Africa in September 2009, and Hazel was the last of my personal dog collection, if you want to call it that, that had been with me on a very long journey. And between December 2022 and August 2025, we have said goodbye to four elderly dogs. So it's been a bit of a ripper. That's what happens when dogs all get old all at the same time. So I have been very blessed to be able to see so many of them through to old age. But it has also been a very difficult thing to have to say goodbye to so many in what is really quite a short period of time. And I just wanted to share from my perspective the things that have helped me navigate that grief and navigate that loss, because I think it can be really easy to get stuck in that. And I'm going to share in here some of the conversations I have had with other pet owners, the things that cause concern, the things that I hear most often people struggle with. I have a lot of conversations with people who bring their dogs in to me for photographs. And often I'll have people who bring quite elderly dogs in to have their pictures taken because they want to have some kind of, really beautiful memory of their dogs. So we'll end up having a conversation about, about that, about what's happening, about how they're looking after their dogs. When I have dogs that come into the studio that are 14 or 15 and they're still in really good shape, people are doing a really great job with that. That's quite something. And the other piece that comes up in this conversation is other dogs that they had that didn't have photographed. And of course, what also comes up in those conversations is what happened towards the end of the lives of those other dogs. And I think the first thing to really talk about is we often have regrets about the moment of when the time comes to say goodbye. And I can look back on my dogs when I've had them, all of the elderly ones bar one, we've had to have put to sleep because it's been time. And often when the moment comes to put them to sleep and it's done, you look back and go, oh, I probably should have done it sooner. I think that is the thing that happens often. It's something I've thought about a lot. It's why I want to share this, because I think it can be really easy to be very hard on yourself and say I should have done it sooner. Take Hazel, for example. So Hazel, if you have a look on my Instagram, you'll see there's some pictures of Hazel not so far back. Little teeny 5.5 kilogram fox-terrier-Chihuahua mix that was feisty as hell, and got to 13 and a half. Everything was good until the week before we had to say goodbye. One evening, she was in a lot of pain. We still don't really know what happened, but she was in a lot of pain. We took her to the emergency vet. She spent 2 days there. They thought she maybe had pancreatitis, but nobody really could see anything on a scan. She came home 2 days later with a fentanyl patch and a huge concoction of pain medication treating for pancreatitis. She was great for 3 days and then had terrible hemorrhagic gastritis. She went into the vet on the Sunday, and then by the Wednesday morning, we had to call time. And we'd been in to see her every day, and she had just gradually, very, very well, not gradually, declined over the time. Went in to visit her, wasn't really responsive. She was on a lot of pain medication. And of course, we're talking to the vets the whole time about what's happening here. What do we think is going on? We're still thinking maybe it was some sort of pancreatitis. I started to have a look at, well, if I look at pictures of her that I took relatively recently compared to old pictures, she was holding her head a bit funny. There could have been a possibility she'd hurt something in her neck or her spine, but we don't know. And this is one thing just to talk about here in this process when we're with vets dealing with this, it can often get quite frustrating because you're kind of looking at it going, you've got a medical degree, why can't you diagnose this? But they're dealing with a patient that can't talk. If you've got a person, you're able to point and say, well, my neck hurts or my toe hurts or my stomach hurts. Vets are guessing. They're guessing when you have a dog with acute pain and you can't really locate where it is with an x-ray or a scan, and it's not really what you think it is, but you don't know. I suspect she'd hurt something in her neck. It didn't show up on an x-ray. Had we been able to get her pain under control, we could have gone for an MRI, but my husband and I both sat and we discussed it and we went, even if we did that and they discovered she's got a disc that needs operating on, are we going to operate on our 13-and-a-half-year-old dog and put her through massive, very serious, very traumatic surgery? Probably not, is the answer to that, because I don't think it would be fair or right. That's my view. We went to go and see her on the Tuesday evening at the vet. The fentanyl patch was back on. The gastritis had got under control, but she was in a lot of pain. And I sat in the consulting room with this dog that was crying and squeaking. And I just went, I think it's actually time to call it now because I don't think this is right. We spoke to the vets and they said, well, do you want to give it another 24 hours? There's a couple of other things we can try, which we did. And then we got called the following morning to say she's been in pain all night. We can't get it under control. There's nothing else we can do. And I sat afterwards and I thought, I really wish I'd listened to myself and we'd done it the night before, because it would have saved her 12 hours overnight of being in pain. Had I done it the night before, would we then have wondered, maybe we could have given it a bit longer, maybe we could have done something else? And I think this is the conundrum we always find ourselves in as pet owners. It's a conundrum I found myself in a couple of times before. Should we have picked up on this sooner? If we had have done, would the outcome be different? My other dog, Jane, who, if you might recall, my beautiful Ridgeback Weimaraner mix, I should have put her to sleep a week before we did. And I'll regret that. She had the last week of her life she was in a lot of pain. We were on advisement from the vets, so it wasn't, you're taking medical advice with it, but I knew I should have done it sooner. However, you can't get caught up in that, because after you've made the decision, when you've come to the end of the road and you know you're at the end of the road and you make the decision, it's easy to look back in hindsight and go, ah, last week would have been better. Yesterday would have been better. 3 days ago would have been better. But you weren't armed with the information 3 days ago. So for anybody who is listening to this and relates to what has happened here, I think the thing I would share with you is the time you decide to put your pet to sleep, because they are old and infirm and not well, is the right time. Whenever you do it, it is the right time. And I think the thing is, you have to let yourself off the hook. You can't change it. It's the right time. And I look at, for the majority of people I deal with, for my animals, they've had a fabulous life. Hazel had a tough last week, a really tough 12 hours. And out of 13-and-a-half-years. Is that the worst thing? But it's hard. It's really hard. The other thing that has helped me enormously to be able to navigate this and sort of talk about it is shifting my view on death. That's something I've done. I'm a closet shaman. So it helps me to have a belief system that says that we're all energy, and when our earthly vehicle finishes, we don't finish. So we have our soul and it moves on. Um, there is a really super book that I think I read on Audible. I listened on Audible by a lady called Sue Morter, which is called The Energy Codes. And there's a piece in there she talks about before her mother died. I think her mother was quite terminally ill, and she'd said to her, "Will you send me a sign when you've gone to wherever you go to, so that I know you're not completely gone?" And her mum would send, they agreed on four-leaf clovers. Um, and she would see them and it would remind her of her mother. So whether it's actually her mother coming back and showing her four-leaf clovers or whether Sue was just spotting it, it doesn't matter. It's something that made her feel better. And that is something I have done with all of my pets before I've had them put to sleep, as I've said to them, send me a sign when you get to wherever you're going. And with Hazel, I had a feeling that it would be white feathers. I don't know why, because obviously we're dealing with our pets that can't talk. So it's anyone's guess. But I had a feeling it would be that. And when we got back from the vet, we came home and I had to, life goes on. This is the other thing is I had to go and carry on. I had to take Ziggy to daycare, and I came back from daycare and sitting by the steps on the way up to my house, tangled in a little cobweb was a little white feather. And it made me feel better. So if you can have some sort of something like that with your pets of what would be a sign they would send you to comfort you, whether it's real or not, who cares? If it comforts you and makes you feel better, wonderful. Love it. I I asked my stepmom before she passed away. I had this conversation with her. She had terminal cancer. And I said to her, if you were to send me a sign, what do you think it would be? And she said to me, well, isn't that a bit weird and creepy? I said, no, I'd actually be really comforting for me if there was something. So she said, oh, I think I'd be a tabby cat. So I said, okay, amazing. Um, the night the evening of the day she died in the afternoon. We woke up, and bear in mind, she's in the UK, but soul and spirit travels wherever it doesn't need to get on a plane. We were woken up by the dogs crazily barking here at home. And I sat up and I looked out the bedroom window and I saw the back end of a cat walking through the garden. Never happened before, never happened since. And I thought, there you are, thanks. You're all good. It made me feel better. So if there is something like that you can agree upon with your pet that gives you some comfort, do it. The other thing I think with the grieving process is it is a grieving process. If we lose family members, everybody else around us gives us a huge amount of grace to deal with that. But we lose pets, and it's really not treated the same societally, really, I don't think. And life kind of has to go on. You might get a couple of days grace, you might be able to take a day off work, but really people are going to expect you to pull yourself back towards yourself pretty quickly. Unless you're surrounded by people who love your pets as much as you do. And unfortunately, we're generally not necessarily all the time. I think having a view on death that it's a moving on, if you like. I guess it's kind of, so closet shaman, so everything in nature is magical and is a sign to me a lot of the time. But if you take quite a Buddhist view on death, we are all going to die. There's nothing you can do about it. Everybody you have around you, you're going to lose at some point. So I think the reality check with that is, if we know that's going to happen, can we make the most of the time we have with our people and our pets, as opposed to spending time worrying about it? I have had conversations with people who've got very, very old pets and they're doing everything they can to keep them going. They're going to die. That's the reality. So you can either fight with it or you can enjoy the time you have and not fight. It's a mindset shift, and it's quite a big one to make, I think, My belief system helps me with that. I think it's very individual for people. So, like I say, I share from my perspective and what's helped me. To come back to the grieving process, grief is not linear. It goes up and down. It moves around. You can be fine, and then the smallest thing can set it off. And Hazel was one of 4 dogs. At one point, I had 7, so we one of 4. So I have 3 in the house with me still. I think that for me has made it a little easier in a multi-dog household to deal with the loss, because there's still other dogs to keep you busy, keep you company. Doesn't mean I value it less. It's just it's been a little bit easier for me to navigate it with extra dogs. But Hazel always used to sleep on the bed. And I had, I don't know, probably a week after, maybe longer after she'd passed. I woke up in the night and I got up to go to the loo, and I got back into bed, and I just had this overwhelming sadness that she wasn't there. So I allowed myself just to cry. Poor husband was like, oh, sobbing in the middle of the night. Yay. But allow it. But I felt very sad. And I found myself starting to go into what ifs and should I have, and what if we'd picked this up sooner? Did I miss something? Did we make the right decision? And I actually just pulled myself back from that thought train and just allowed myself to sit in feeling sad. Grief is something that is an emotion that you need to, in my opinion, sit with, but not sit in. And I think there's a big difference, because if you sit in it and allow it to overwhelm you and to take you down the road of, it's not fair, I wish she was here, I should have done something differently, that gets you nowhere other than keeps you perpetually in a place of abject pain. If you can sit with it and say, okay, I'm not going to allow the story to take over here, but what I am going to do is allow myself to acknowledge how sad I feel and the enormous void that is here and how much that hurts. It passes quicker. So if you need to go and have a cry, go and have a cry. But be with the feeling that's coming up, as opposed to the stories about all the things you could have done differently. You cannot change anything in the past. It doesn't help you to keep reaching backwards and swirling around with, maybe we could have given it another 12 hours. Maybe we could have done this. It's done. We made the right decision, because this was a little dog who was in a huge amount of pain, and it would have been unfair to keep it going any longer, because we'd hit the end of the road of what we could do. And this is the one mercy we can offer our animals that we will never be able to offer our parents or our friends or anybody else who is in a huge amount of pain and isn't going to get better. It's the one gift we can give our pets, I think. So I just wanted to share, because I think it is something that's very hard. I hadn't wanted to sit and cry on a YouTube video, but here you are. Here I am. And I think it's just, if what I've shared maybe gives you a bit of comfort, maybe helps you to feel a little better, to reach a bit of acceptance, to forgive yourself if you think the timing wasn't right. Yeah, it's a part of pet ownership that is brutal. And I think very rarely do we end up in a situation where we have a pet that gets to 15, 16 and then just peacefully dies in their sleep. From my experience of all of the dogs that we have had, I've had to make a decision for all of them. Nobody has peacefully died at home. It's been messy, it's been inconvenient, and it's been awful. Out of the 5 dogs that have passed since I've been here in South Africa, 1 seemed to choose, and 1 went very suddenly, and that was Dora. But even then, I had to make the final decision. We think she had some sort of cancerous splenic tumor that just ruptured, and she just keeled over at home and lost consciousness. And I don't think she knew anything about it. So that was awful for me, awful for us, because there was no warning. She'd been absolutely fine up till that point and then just left. But I think for her, it was much better. Whereas I think of some of our others, there's been prolonged, like with, with Hazel, it was a week, but it was a hard week. She was at the vet, she was unhappy, but it is what it is. And I think the only way you can actually make peace with it is to accept that it happens as it happens. The right time is the right time. There isn't another time that it would have been better to do it, because if you're not armed with the facts, how do you make a decision? Hindsight's 2020. And the thing it has taught me with losing pets is that the time we have with them is really finite. It is really precious. We don't know how long we have with them. I was expecting, Hazel was a small dog. I was expecting we'd have her till she was 15, 16, 17, because she was in really good shape. So don't take it for granted. Enjoy your creatures. Spend time with them. Love them, enjoy them, and know that you're doing that in the fact they're not always going to be here. So make the most of the time that you do have with them. Thank you for listening to my little vlog here. I just hope this reaches and helps someone who needs it. So do feel free to share this with somebody you know who's perhaps going through this or has gone through it and is struggling with it. No, you're not alone. And it's hard, and the only way out is through. So is be with it, and hold your creatures tight and enjoy them.